This video is about Quaker principles, or you'll sometimes hear the term Quaker testimonies, or defined as the acronym SPICES, S-P-I-C-E-S. The SPICES are, Quakers use this concept of how we are called to live our lives and be same time faithful to the Spirit. The modern Quaker principles or testimonies of simplicity, peace, integrity, community, equality, and stewardship are all solid secular values. Many people, many organizations of all different faiths fundamentally resonate with these values. But Quakers have chosen to articulate them and use them as a guide to the way that we are called to live our life and be faithful to the Spirit. Quakers talk about this concept of let our lives speak. The SPICES, or these testimonies, are one way that is important to many Quakers, and a way that we let our lives speak. So let's get started. The first one is simplicity. This was a concept that early Quakers felt was very important, and many Quakers do today. But it's the whole idea of how do we keep the trappings of life from getting in the way of our direct connection with the Spirit. So, whatever it was, whether it was fashion, or early Friends felt music and dancing would get in the way of the Spirit. We no longer do, but we still need to pay attention to what is it about our lives that can keep us from really paying attention to what's important. And that's how I really think about this, is I think about it as, how do I want to live my life? How do I want to organize my life in a way that does not detract from me truly being able to connect with, to pay attention to what's really important to me.
Simplicity was a value, a principle that I really struggled with growing up. And I think as one of 3 girls in my family of 5 children, I think all 3 girls especially struggled with this concept and what it meant. Did it mean plain, drab, that you couldn't have the latest fashion? What was it that simplicity really meant? And finally, my mother explained it to us in a way that really connected with me, and it's how I think about it today. And that is that it's important that we live in the world, not of the world. So we're not just using this life and this world as a way to get what we want, but we are part of it. We contribute to it. We are helping to make the world a better place. And the way that we live is part of all of that.
That phrase that we hear quite a bit in Quaker circles of live simply so that others may live,
yes,
is one that resonates with me and connects us right back to this principle.
Yeah.
So I'm ready to go on.
Okay. So the P in SPICES stands for the peace testimony. And Quakers, along with the Mennonites and the Brethren, have what are known as the historic peace churches. There's a long tradition of those 3 peace churches working together in a number of different ways. Quakers believe that we should live our lives in a way that takes away the occasion for wars. That wars do not solve problems or solve conflict. They just create occasions for suffering. We believe in listening, in working together, in recognizing differences, and finding a way that we can work together and grow and establish community among us in a way that does not call for violence.
So that peace testimony, in a way, really connects and is relevant at a global perspective, as well as at a national perspective, is important in our organizations, in our communities, and interpersonally. Mm-hmm. It's a very important part of how we think about the world. There's one interesting example in our communities, in our not-for-profit communities, is the early Kendal communities felt very strongly that the restraints that were so common and prevalent in nursing homes were doing direct violence to that individual's spirit, was a taking away their ability, their humanity, their ability to think and to do what they needed to thrive as they got older. An organization in Kendal was formed called Untie the Elderly. Untie the Elderly then was an outreach opportunity for Kendal that spent time and effort educating nursing homes around the state of Pennsylvania and ultimately around the country to reduce the use of restraints in nursing homes, and was a very successful effort.
I think it also comes to play when we think about leading and working in organizations, Quaker principle organizations, because when there is conflict, as we work to resolve conflict, it is a fundamental piece of that we're working to build community and stay in relationship and establish relationships among each other as we resolve the conflict.
Acknowledge conflict is important. We can learn and grow and thrive through conflict, but it's how we deal with it is what's so important. The next principle or testimony is integrity or truth. George Fox, founder of Quakerism, sort of hearkened back to the Bible when he said, "Let your yea be yea and your nay be nay." In other words, there is only one dimension or level of truth. That's why Quakers don't swear oaths on the Bible. They don't swear oaths because that would suggest that when your hand was on the Bible, there was a different level of truth than you were giving when your hand wasn't on the Bible. So Quakers will not swear on the Bible. Another example of that was that many Quakers were businessmen in society in the late 17th century and 18th century. And Quakers were really the group of business people that established this idea of one price for a product, so that there was not a different price depending on who you were when you walked in the door. So just that integrity, that idea of integrity, that idea of truth-telling was very important and continues to be very important to Quakers.
The next testimony is community, the C in SPICES for community. And this is a principle that flows throughout so much of Quakerism and how we worship, how we live, how we look at our businesses. This notion that we are part of something bigger, that we are better when we are gathered as a community, whether physically or philosophically. It's better when we are thinking of this as we are part of a larger whole. So this has informed the way thinking about retirement communities. It's informed Quakers' forming of boarding schools and colleges throughout history. It informs the way we make decisions in organizations. We think of the organization as a community, not just the people who are served, but also those who are providing the service. So it's a real hallmark of Quakerism and Quaker organizations, the importance of community. We look at it as a philosophy, not just a physical place.
That takes us to equality, the E in SPICES. The testimony or principle of equality emerged from the fundamental belief that everybody, every human being, despite their race, their sex, has access to the Spirit. This is a hallmark of Quakerism as well. Each of us has the ability to access the Spirit. So that translated or sort of resulted in early Quakers being very involved in social activities, lifting up people in society that were persecuted, involved in women's rights, in women's suffrage, involved in the whole idea of abolition many Quakers, not all, but many Quakers were involved in abolition. Many Quakers are involved in civil rights, and on and on. This concept of equality. Many women were active preachers in early Quaker society. Women traveled all over the world, literally, trying to spread the idea, spread the belief, spread the concept, spread this idea of that deep personal spiritual connection that each of us can have. So the idea of equality, the concept of equality, comes from that fundamental belief that each of us has access to the Spirit.
I think too, with equality, to me, what you just said about each of us has that connection to the Spirit harkens back to the peace testimony. How could I take another's life if there's a spark of the divine in me and there is a spark of the divine in you? The last letter in the SPICES acronym is S for stewardship. And this has to do with the commitment to caring for all of the gifts that we have as human beings or as organizations. It first was brought about thinking about environmental causes and taking care of the earth and the importance of stewardship around the environmental and our planet. But it also, we talk about it in terms of all the gifts we've been given. So the human gifts of the people who work for our organizations, the people that serve, and also financial resources and the importance of sound, principled stewardship around these resources.
So these principles provide a framework for how all of us are called to live our lives, and a glimpse into why these foundational values are so important to the not-for-profit Quaker organizations that we live in, work for, and govern. Let me leave you then with a quote from George Fox. I'm going to read this. It's one that I think many of you may have heard, and Jane will certainly be familiar with it. George Fox said, "Be patterns, be examples in all countries, places, islands, nations, wherever you come, that your carriage in life may preach among all sorts of people and to them. Then you will come to walk cheerfully over the world, answering that of God in everyone."